My name is Igor Andrade. I'm an intern for the Spady Museum in the summer of 2021. And today I'm here with Joyce Clifford, the archivist for the Spady Museum. Hello, Joyce. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to participate in your project. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here. What exactly do you do in the Spady Museum?
I am the volunteer archivist at the moment. I was a docent, a volunteer who led tours at the Murakami Museum until COVID started. And then, of course, the museum closed. And I'm also a realtor, and I wasn't doing much work. So I was looking around for something to do, and we had uh, visited the Spady, a docent exchange. So I called up Charlene and left a message for her asking if she needed any help from an archivist, because that was my training. And she said they did and told me about this fabulous collection, the Virginia Snyder collection. Virginia was a private detective and before that a reporter, a journalist for local newspapers here in South Florida, and a very interesting woman. So I came in to a collection that was in cardboard boxes and had some significant damage. So the first thing that I had to do was refolder everything and try to rebox it, and so that, and which is part of preservation and conservation aspect of being an archivist.
So you would say that the job of an archivist will be based around preservation and organization of.
Well, there's archives are to provide access to people's manuscripts or collections or records, however they're designated, to arrange them. They actually can appraise them for not the monetary value, but the historical value. And then also to conserve that records, to preserve the records, and then make them, using finding aids, make them accessible to the general public, now online, but it used to be everything was on paper.
Okay.
So there's appraisal, arrangement, description, access. Those are all parts of what an archivist does. And in some cases, there's one archivist that's doing all of those jobs in a small archive. And then there's universities and companies, insurance companies, other large companies that employ dozens and dozens of archivists, and even have different archives within the company for different aspects of the business. So it's a widely varied field.
All right.
Surprisingly, because most people have never heard of archives. They have no idea what an archive is, except that it's a computer term, which they took from archives.
Yeah. So how do you think the internet and this like information revolution we're living right now affects archivists?
Well, first off, if you want your collection to be accessible, it needs to be online. And even if you don't have every little detail online, you give people guideposts or signposts that tell them, well, this collection is relevant to what I'm doing because I'm interested in women's military history at this college during World War II, or I'm interested in social justice movements within a limited geographical area during the 70s. There's a nice archive in Boston for the gay community and the history of the gay community in Boston. So it's varied. It's widely varied. There's archives about cowboy history in Oklahoma City. You know, there's university records collections and college records collections. There's a lot of different aspects, but getting it online is what brings your collections to people's attention and to the attention of scholars, so they know that they probably should look at your collection because it's relevant to what they're doing in their work.
What type of education you had to get to be an archivist, and which one would you recommend to pursue for the people who are interested to like
Okay, well,
join being an archivist?
I received a bachelor's degree and in history, but as I said, it doesn't really matter. It's helpful if that's your interest. And then I went to what we called library school, which is a school that provides a master's degree or a PhD in library and information science. There aren't a huge number of those. I happened to go to Simmons, but there are other colleges and universities that have programs, but not every college has an access to library and information science. And the information science is the computer side. So I had to take library classes and technology classes and classes on how to manage an archives management. So it was a good base. It was a very good base.
And which path would you think that like it would be the best for someone who's starting, like who just got fresh in college, wants to be an archivist? What should he do?
Well, probably volunteer at their college archives would be a good start. Of course, it's unless you're a work study student, those are unpaid positions. But even just working 3 or 4 hours a week, if you spend one afternoon there, you can learn a lot, especially if you have a good archivist training you. I was lucky. I had a terrific archivist who trained me, who had years of experience and was a very kind person and very patient. And I really, her name was Patricia Albright. She was really a wonderful person and excellent training. Excellent. But some of my classmates have gone on to work overseas, to work in England and Ireland, in Iraq, all over, Nigeria. It's quite remarkable.
You're comfortable saying it, like what's the pay range for
Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. It's equivalent to a teacher.
That's so sad to say.
Yes, it is sad to say. Teachers deserve a lot more money. But archivists don't make a lot of money unless they're really, like highly specialized researchers. They might make some money. I don't know. But I know that it's just because usually it's for cities, you could be a city archivist, and you might make a halfway decent salary depending on your political connections. But in general, it's not a high-paying position. It all depends on where you are in the hierarchy and in the importance that your governing body gives you.
So how much of what you learn and what you know about archivism, you learn it after you got hired?
Well, I came here as a trained archivist.
Like, did you learn more on your job or like on your training?
Well, because I haven't worked a lot, and I've been mostly a volunteer. I have to say it was my training, and then the different internships that I had. That's where I learned the most. You know, the training was good, but the internships, the actual hands-on work, is where you learn a lot. You learn a lot. I was a work study student in a small college archives, and that's where I fell in love with archives. I'd never even heard of an archive. You know, I knew that there were different kinds of libraries and that they all weren't, free libraries where you go in and take out books, but I never thought of what those kind of libraries contained. And a lot of them are archives. So it was something I was totally ignorant about, and until I went to college. And that's when I opened my eyes, because I lucked out getting this job. I started because of an assignment in a class. We had to use the archives in order to complete a project. It really was just wonderful. It was just a wonderful experience. And then after that, I started volunteering, and I was able to get the work study job also. So it was really, really helpful. And like I said, I had a great trainer.
Why did you choose the Spady Museum?
Because I had visited it as on a docent exchange. And I was really interested in the idea, because I knew Charlene and Vera both explained that this community was actually started by Bahamian runaway slaves, basically, Delray Beach, and yet there had been some kind of disconnect for when the Boynton and Linton and Woolbright came down from Michigan, and they claimed that they started the community. Well, the Bahamians were here first, along with Black Seminoles from the tribe, and they received no acknowledgement, no recognition. And so I thought that was interesting, and that's something that's important to me, is that
giving recognition, giving the props.
Exactly. And frankly, I had contacted a couple of years ago, the Historical Society, and no one ever responded to me at all. So I thought, well, they're just too cool for me. And not to work there, just to become a member. And I just thought they were terribly disorganized. And then I found out that they had actually suggested, when members of the African American community, the Carib American community, offered to add stuff to the Delray Historical Society, that they had been told to start their own museum.
Nice.
So that's, nice. So that was another thing that drew me to the Spady. And then when I came here, they had these fabulous black and white pictures, old photographs of the tennis, how important tennis always was in the Delray community, to Black people and to white people. It was a big deal. Well, that explained a lot about having a tennis coliseum downtown, because this is decades ago. Tennis was always important for whatever reason. I don't know the reason. I'm not a tennis person, but I just thought that, I liked that. So the photographs really drew me. And then, of course, I had met Charlene, and then although I didn't have any contact with her until I called to volunteer, and I was just so grateful that they wanted me to come back. So I'm happy to be here, and happy to work on this fabulous collection. Virginia was a really interesting woman, and she was all about social justice, and lived right on Swinton Avenue in a historical home, and was really a vital part of this community the whole time she lived here. She's an interesting woman.
Thank you so much for the interview.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
This
Thank
was-
you.
This was Joyce Clifford, the archivist for Spady Museum. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, like I said, it was my pleasure. And I'm glad you're an intern here now.